Okay, I'm getting a message that we're live on YouTube. And now, Noah, are you going to hand over the host controls back to me?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
no problem.
Okay, great. I think we're set to go. So this is the regular hearing of the Archaeological Review Committee for the City of Santa Fe. The date today is Thursday, May 7th. For those of you in attendance, when your case comes up on the agenda, if you have a case on the agenda, we'll move you to the panel, and then that will give you full capability to speak and be seen. If you have comments on a case during the public comment period of every case, please use your raise hand function, and we will make sure that you have a chance to speak. And also, if you'd like to type into the Q&A box, I'll be monitoring the Q&A box as well for any additional questions. So with that said, I will hand over the reins to Chair David Eck.
Thank you, Lisa. I call this meeting of the Archaeological Review Committee of 7 May to order. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. David Eck.
Present.
Jake Abbey.
Present.
Derek Pierce.
Present.
Courtney Wands.
Present.
Dale Zinn.
Here.
There is a quorum in attendance, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ann. Next item is approval of agenda. Lisa, are there any changes to be made to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, I have no changes to make to the agenda. I've just shared my screen, which has the agenda on it for public viewing. But I do not have any changes.
Thank you. Committee members in.
I have no objections to the agenda.
All right. Rather than go through all the members, if no one has any objections, we will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
A second.
We must have a roll call vote.
Yes,
Signify
sir.
approval by saying aye.
Jake Abbey.
Aye.
Derek Pierce.
Aye.
Courtney Wands.
Aye.
Dale Zinn.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion has been approved.
Thank you. Next item is approval of minutes from 23 April 2020. Anything to add to all this, Lisa, before we proceed?
I do not have anything to add.
All right. Members in.
I had something I can't resolve. I don't remember what it said. I don't know if it needs to be brought up. There was an inaudible question I had for Lisa, and she said she didn't know the answer. And I certainly don't know what the question was now. So that was on page 34 of the minutes. So I think we'll just leave it as it is, Mr. Chair. On page 41, starting with the second paragraph, it refers to a convoluted statement of mine, I think. He said at the second sentence, he said, and then I think it goes delete he and put in quotation, this property came within one vote of being declared significant in the Santa Fe district by the Historic Design Review Board, close quote. How, and where it says inaudible, I think what it says, it said I would argue that significant is not valid, but it is contributing with almost all facades being primary. And then I said most of that which took place under the 1950s I believe would be eligible for at least state register of historic properties, but probably not the national. And then so I said I would argue strongly about the statement that it's ineligible for those two registers.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that is a direct quote. And he changed what he said, so I don't know what you want to do about that.
I don't want to change history, so if I didn't say strongly, then that's fine.
No,
I'll say
sir.
it now, I'm strong. But I don't want to use, just on the side, I don't want that statement that it's not eligible by the archaeologist to be used somewhere down the road with in front of the H board as saying this building shouldn't be, isn't eligible.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Sin, if you don't like the statement, you can strike it.
Well, I can't strike the archaeologist statement.
You can.
So the only thing I want to
strike
do
any-
is, I don't think I can strike his statements, but the inaudible one,
I
can.
I will put that, what you said, where it
all right,
says.
that's all I need to say. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you for holding that.
Other than that, I have nothing else, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Member Wines?
Sorry.
I think we're battling.
Having unmuting problems.
I'm sorry. So we didn't hear your comments.
Oh, there's one area I'd like to correct, but since I have no idea what it is, I actually said I can't really correct it, so I've got no correction.
All right. Then moving on to member Ivy.
I have no comments.
Thank you. Member Pierce.
No issues with minutes. They were very good as usual, but even tougher circumstances this time. So they're to be commended for doing a great job.
Thank you.
All right, I have no comments to make regards to the minutes, so we can entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the minutes of April 23rd, 2020. As are.
I would second that, but add my amendments to that.
We did have a correction by Mr. Sin.
Please, then
I will.
amend my motion to include those corrections.
Thank you.
I second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Well, let's have a roll call.
Derek Pierce,
Aye.
Courtney Wines,
Aye.
Dale Zinn,
Aye.
Jake Ivy.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion has been approved.
Thank you. We'll now move to matters from the floor.
So if anyone from the floor, as an attendee, has a matter to raise, you can raise your hand either by, well, everyone's online, so using your raise hand button. But I am not seeing any hands raised.
All right, then, thank you. We will move on to action items. Number one being case number 2013. Ron Winters, agent for Kelly Cable, requests approval of an archaeological monitoring plan for the proposed CenturyLink project at East Palace Avenue and Cienega Street in the historic downtown archaeological review district. Thank you for the staff report, Lisa. Anything to add?
I have nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ron Winters. Is there anything we need to know?
Are we good?
Now we can hear you.
Okay. So I would only say that there is a site that was, when I doing the NIMCRA search, there was a site in close proximity, LA 174243, to the project area. Although there was no description as it was listed as data entry in progress. The client has requested a bore on this project because of the pushback they got from the city about taking up the sidewalk in terms of if needing to trench that, and then the crossing of Palace Avenue. Back to the site that I mentioned, it wouldn't be impacted by this scope of work, as the project will begin from an existing manhole on the south side of the street and go to the new handhole 170 feet north. So that's all I have to say.
Mr. Chair, may I clarify what he said? Did you
Sure.
say an existing handhole or an existing manhole in the middle of the street?
It's an existing manhole and it's
Thank
going
you.
to a new handhole.
Handhole, okay, thank you very much.
Both
Chair.
were involved.
Okay, both words, okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Members in,
I have no questions on this one, Chair.
thank you. Member Wands,
So, could you clarify a little further about how it won't go through the site? How it won't go through 174241?
243.
No, there's
Wow.
2 sites that it's potentially going through.
Oh, okay. Well, from what I could tell on the ground, it looked like it went down the center of the street. I can't, like I said, I couldn't find further information based on the NIMCRIS search. So I can't tell exactly with no site forms, where it traveled. In the bore, normally they'll stay 4 to 5 feet, below the ground surface. I can't say for a fact that it wouldn't impact them, but part of that has to do with not being able to get a description of it.
Right. Did you contact OAS about getting a description of the sites?
I did not.
And then I also wanted to ask, I noticed in your description in your methods, it seems you're mainly focusing on trenching.
No, there's a small amount of trenching. Most of it is a bore. You're right.
Right. I'm saying, but your methods are primarily discussing things that you would do during trenching, not boring.
Okay, I didn't include the boring. I thought I did.
You're talking about 5 foot
methodology.
long profiles in the trenches and everything like that versus
Got it,
what you
yeah.
wouldn't see in boring.
Got it.
So
I can.
those were my comments on it.
thank you, Courtney.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, who was that for, David?
Member Ivy,
I have no comments.
thank you, Jake. Member Pierce,
I have no comments either.
All right, thank you. I think the only thing I would offer to follow up on number one's questions is that I think I'd strongly encourage a contact to OAS to get some direct idea of what it is they found, exactly where, how it's defined, and be clear before the project begins as to any chance of it being a factor during your monitoring.
Okay,
So does someone care to make a motion?
I move that in case 2020 dash 002013 ARC Ron Winters, that we approve the monitoring plan. Courtney, did you suggest a change? I mean, David, did you suggest a change, the two of you?
with
It,
correction.
it really doesn't reflect a change to the document. We're just trying to prompt a conversation and an exchange of information prior to the project beginning so as to hopefully ward off any surprises.
Yes,
I would-
okay. So
I would second the motion with the addendum that Mr. Winters approach and get additional information about the specifics of those sites and whether it'll be impacted.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Is that
Accept
clear?
that?
Mr. Chair, can you, what is the site that is of concern in particular?
So,
LA number?
LA 174243 runs down Palace, but LA 174241 runs down Cienega.
Okay,
That was 1742 what?
Sorry. 174241 runs down Cienega, and LA 174243 runs down Palace. So they're perpendicular to each other, and they were found in backhoe trenches themselves.
Courtney, I would say, I mean, I know that they went down Palace in the street and in the street on Cienega. And the Boer were planning on doing it starting at the manhole and going under the sidewalk there. So that doesn't mean that site doesn't, those sites don't, extend beyond. And but it is a slightly different location. So it would be great to find out what Eric knows about that, if he can tell me, and so I can be aware of that. I agree with David, prior to the field work.
Right, because 10 feet when discussing trenches, if it's a site, you're still most likely going to hit it.
Right, right.
The key bit of information would be the depth.
Right.
And that plays off against the proposed bore.
Got it.
As long as you're going deeper, then you will probably successfully avoid it. So after that further discussion, where do we stand? We have a motion and a second. We
We
need
do.
a roll call.
Mr. Chair, prior to the roll call, I got an acronym that he needed to contact, which was OAS. Is that, could you give what that acronym stands for?
Certainly, that's the Office of Archaeological Studies.
And that's Dr. Blindman's group, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct.
Thank you, and I will call the roll.
Sorry for being obtuse.
Mr. Chair, before we call the roll, can I just verify that I have the motion down correctly because there was so much discussion? Do you mind if I just repeat back what I have for the motion?
Please,
Go right.
Okay, so I understand the motion to be as follows. To approve the monitoring plan with the suggestion that the archaeologist contact Office of Archaeological Studies for further info on site LA 174243, LA 174241 prior to work beginning.
Yes.
That's an elegant rephrasing, yes.
Lisa, there were also a couple minor corrections that Courtney had that I noted.
I don't think she
Yeah.
was asking for correction. She just was noting that it speaks more to trenching than does boring. But
Got it.
I think that stands as the motion, Lisa. And Mr. Chair, I'd call for the question.
Yes.
Shall I?
May we proceed?
Yes, sir. Derek Pierce,
Aye.
Courtney Wands,
Aye.
Dale Zinn,
Aye.
Jake Addy.
Aye.
The motion has been approved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is case number 2020-2014. Ron Winters, agent for Orlin Gerortiz, requests approval of an archaeological reconnaissance report for 8.387 acres within a portion of small holding claim 1229 for proposed development on Kate's Way in the River and Trails Archaeological Review District. Lisa, is there anything to add to your staff report?
I have nothing to add, Mr. Chair.
I would offer a suggestion that you refrain from using the word determined prior to the consideration of any entities reported and documented and presented until the committee has had their say. Contractors do not make determinations.
Gotcha.
All right, Mr. Winters, what do we need to know?
Well, I just wanted to say that, the description of HCPI 48479 is limited, given that, all of the state and city agencies where historical background research would normally be conducted were closed. And so a lot of that information is not available online. I was in contact with the BLM and the government land office. I did get the township range and section plat that you see there. And I also looked at was advised to maybe look at the field notes, and I went through all of the field notes for that area and didn't see any reference to this road. So I'm basing my relative age of the roadbed on its construction and its lack of use in recent years. So like I said, there was not a lot to say about it. It certainly, I believe, was historic based on some of the artifacts associated, and just given its physical appearance.
All right,
Mr. Chair, may I get clarification for the acronym that Mr. Winters used?
please do.
You looked at something called P what? You looked at all the-
BLM, GLO,
BLM,
yeah, and then the GLO, the Government Land Office.
yes, and but you said you looked at all of the GLOs?
Well, I researched their site.
Thank you. That's what, that answers my question. Thank you.
Oh,
Mr.
okay.
All right. Members in.
I have no questions. I just wanted to ask Ron, and maybe it's my own obtuse reading of this, but how is this related to the other one on Kate's Way geographically? Are they the one you, I think, are still out there working on?
Oh, the historic dwellings that I excavated.
Right.
Yeah. It's not that far. It's probably maybe 500 feet, but the only thing that might have been associated was on IO1. There were a few fragments of metal cans, maybe background noise from that site. The site boundary didn't go all the way to Kate's Way
I see.
on the east, but it doesn't, it didn't really relate other than those few can fragments.
Okay, well, I just wanted to mention that I just, in terms of those areas and the historic, the limited disturbance and the interesting history of those small holding claims, it makes kind of a nice context to the history of that area of Santa Fe that we don't know much about. And it could have very well been farm and ranch stuff that kind of started overlapping historic stuff. And I just wanted to thank you for your brief but great history on the history of horseshoes.
You got to work with what you have.
Exactly. Thank you.
You're
That's
welcome.
it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dale. Member Wands?
No comments. I just, the only thing I would note is, I think normally roadbeds, we record as sites just for future reference.
Okay.
Other than that, no comments.
I'm sorry to say what?
I think we've been recording roadbeds as sites, not on HICP forms. So it doesn't have to be changed or anything, just kind of for future reference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Member Ivy?
I love the bit about the silver horseshoe. Other than that, no comment.
Thank you, Jake. Member Pierce?
I have no comments on this case.
All right. Here I go. First, I want to congratulate you on the use of new and different reference material for your discussion of the project area and environment. Then I'm going to burst that balloon by saying the citations to the sources are not in your references cited. Dick Petty does not
You know
appear.
what, David? I didn't cite it in the references.
The reference to Dick Petty, 1993,
Uh-huh.
does not appear in the references cited, at least as I have them before me.
Okay.
And the reference to the NRCS 2016 given in the text does not appear in the references cited. Instead, it appears as 2019.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, what page is that?
Oh, excuse me. That's on page 8,
Thank you.
the third, fourth paragraphs. Page 21 of the packet, page 19 of your document, Ron. The paragraph at the top of the page, you note that one of the sites occurs within close proximity, although it is not what was originally described. I happen to know how you know that, but it would be good to have a citation to yourself to explain why you made that statement.
But everybody knew that. Got it.
page 33 of the packet, 31 of your document, where you describe this abandoned historic road.
Rick? Do we have our stenographer online?
She is, but she's muted.
Karen is here. It doesn't look like she's able to talk right now. She did give me a call earlier saying she had some problems talking. If I could take roll call if that was to happen. So that being the case, I'll take roll call for her.
Okay, Jim, will you then also be taking minutes?
Karen will be taking the minutes. I'll just do the roll call.
Okay, thank you. So Jamie, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Counselor Chair Vihil Koppler,
Present?
Commissioner Anna Hansen,
Present.
Commissioner Anna Hamilton,
Present.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Here.
Citizen Member JC Helms,
Here.
alternate Citizen Member Peter Ives,
Here.
Las Campanas Board Member Tom Eaglehoff,
He's on mute.
he's on mute.
Tom, you're on mute.
Here.
Okay, Las Campanas alternate Ken Kirk.
Here.
Okay, looks like everybody's here.
Okay, we
So
have,
I just got a message that somebody's not finding our meeting online at the city. Is that where they would go to watch this meeting? On YouTube?
They would
Yes,
go to the city site. We just started it, right, about 2 minutes ago. So it should be there.
thank you, Anna. So
Okay.
next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Before we do that, I want to alert the board that we have two item 13s. And they are both the same item, and we originally had a different item as number 12. It's not here. So we will be determining the course of action that we will do for the former agenda item 12 at a future called meeting, whether it's a special meeting or whether we'll be at our next board meeting. So I just wanted you to know that we do understand that we have two item 13s. So I think if Staff Rick, would you agree to move one item 13?
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Hanson, I've asked Rick, can you respond?
I think that's the appropriate, course of action.
Okay, so are you withdrawing item 13?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Hanson,
So on my consent agenda, I have 12 and 13. I don't have two 13s.
all right, so I realize some people do have a different agenda. However, we have to go by one that was published. So this is the one
And we
that,
didn't get the same agenda.
well, because you may have gotten earlier planning agendas, but the actual one was published to the public is the one we have to go. All right, so I wanted to make that clear. So,
No, I'm confused.
well, we only have two item 13s and it's the same item. And on the public agenda, there's no item 12. So do I have any, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Can you? Madam Chair?
Yeah.
I think we need, I'm confused. So
Okay.
I'd like to know what's on the consent agenda. If you could read those items. If I can't see them, I don't know what I'd be approving. I don't understand which items are still on consent and which have been removed. You can't just give the numbers because if our list is different,
All right.
I'm not sure which we're actually postponing.
All right. just to backtrack a bit on the agenda, our action items right now, we're on item number 3, approval of the agenda. So going through the consent items on the published agenda, we have 2 item 13s which are the same, and item reads, request for approval of amendment number 1 to professional service agreement with Glorietta Geoscience Inc. to extend term of agreement and rollover contract balance. Okay. 2020. So we have that duplicated on the public agenda, 13 and 13. We have no item 12.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, so on my agenda, it says that this was received at the city clerk's office on April 28th, 2020, time 4:45, and I have a 12 and a 13. So does that mean that that page somehow, the agenda was not the same agenda that was sent out to myself and Commissioner Hamilton?
I don't know. I'm not dealing with the paper agenda. I get one. I get what is published to the public. And that's off the city website. And that has 2 item 13s.
Okay.
So what you have is not what the public has. And I don't know where the glitch was. So at this point, it's moot because we're dealing with public information right now. Okay, so.
Are you free to say what item was actually being postponed to a future meeting?
Nancy, I'll rely on you. Can you respond?
Yes, Madam Chair, the item that appears on your paper agendas and also on mine, but somehow didn't make it, somehow there was some glitch that happened on the agenda that was posted on the City of Santa Fe's website, and which the public accesses. So we just learned about this very last minute today. The item that is on our agendas and that we may need to call a special meeting for or consider at a future meeting, as the chair indicated, is the request for approval of amendment number 3 to the legal services agreement with Snell and Wilmer to increase compensation in the amount of $400,000.
Okay, thank you. So that's being dropped. So with those changes, I will move to approve the agenda.
Okay, I realize there's another participant raised. Do we have a second?
Yes.
So I have a comment.
Before you do that, I didn't see who seconded.
J.C. Helms.
Oh, okay. Thank
You can't see me, I can't see you, but.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Romero Worth, did you have a question? No. Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
If that means there is nothing on the consent agenda, is that correct?
There's one item.
One item, number 13.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions on the approval of the agenda? Okay, Jay, will you call the roll?
Yes. Chair Vihil Coppler?
Yes.
Vice Chair Anna Hansen?
Yes.
Commissioner Anna Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilor Romero Worth?
Yes.
Citizen Member J.C. Helms?
Yes.
Alternate Citizen Member Peter Ives?
Do I vote on this as the alternate?
No,
No.
JV.
Okay.
I didn't think so. No worries.
Thank
Las
you. Peter.
Campanas Board Member Tom Eaglehoff? And you're on mute.
Oh, I don't vote either.
No, the Las Campanas members don't vote, Jamie Ray.
Okay.
Just a question, do we have our recording person on yet?
She's on, but she's on mute and she said she's had some problems whenever it comes to speaking. So I guess she can't unmute it at times. I'm not sure.
So will you all be, and I guess refer to Karen, who is recording this meeting right now?
Karen.
Okay. And Karen confirmed. Can you hear me? Karen?
I'm sorry.
Karen? Can you hear?
Yes.
I believe she can hear you, but I don't think she can talk back at this point.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Confirmation that this meeting is being recorded.
Madam Chair, you can send her a chat. You click on chat and type her a message and ask her if she's taking notes.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. I'd ask that you do that so I can move on.
I will do that.
Okay. Next item is approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Hanson.
I move to approve the consent agenda, and then I would like to make a comment during, after we have a second.
All right.
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Commissioner Hamilton. Discussion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to state that I really appreciate James Biarzi being on these technical meetings that I have been attending with Lionel on the MDC. So I just want to make sure that that is recognized as part of his contract, because I find it very helpful to have him on those meetings. So I'm just making that clear that I am requesting to make sure that James Biarzi continues to attend the LANL technical meetings that meet once a month for 2 hours.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. So any other discussion before we vote on approving the consent agenda? All right, Jamie Ray, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Chair Hill Coppler,
Yes?
Vice Chair Anna Hansen,
Yes.
Commissioner Anna Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilor Romero Worth,
Yes.
and Citizen Member JC Helms.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The consent agenda is approved. Next item is the approval of the minutes. Do we have any changes or comments about the minutes? Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, thank you. So I have changes, and this has kind of been an ongoing issue at the moment, and I know Karen, this will not make Karen happy, but on page 1, under where it says BDD board members present, they still have Commissioner Hamilton listed as the chair and nobody as vice chair. So that needs to be corrected. This has kind of been an ongoing issue over at our BDD meetings. So I would like this to be corrected, that Councilor Joanne V. Hill Coppler is chair and Commissioner Anna Hansen is vice chair. Then on page 13, a little above the middle of the page where I'm speaking, Commissioner Hansen, they, us, raw water, us should be use raw water. And then on page 18, right before next regular meeting, and Commissioner Hamilton, minor thing, unless there are some changes to travel allowance based on coronas, I have a trip out to EPA beginning of April, and it says beginning of March. I don't know, Commissioner Hamilton, we were in the beginning of March, so I don't think you could have left. So
That's correct. It was for the beginning of April, and just for the record, it was canceled, but.
Right. So I'm just correcting it so that it says the beginning of April. And with that, I move to approve the minutes with changes.
Do I have a second?
Is there a second?
A second.
Yeah,
All
I'll
right.
second.
Thank you. Any further comment before we? All right, seeing none, Jamie Ray, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Chair Vihil Coppler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anna Hansen,
Yes.
Commissioner Anna Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilor Romero Worth.
I'll abstain since I wasn't there. Thank you.
Thank you. Citizen Member JC Helms.
Yes.
Okay, that's everyone.
Motions, approval of the minutes has passed. Next, matters from the public, and did we say, Rick, were you going to read that? The one item that we got, or who is going to read that?
Madam Chair, I
Yes.
suggested that Kyle read it when he gives his presentation since it's related to his presentation.
Okay, thank you for that. So we did receive one email, matters from public, and that will be read later on under information items. Which brings us to information items, report on May 5th Fiscal Services Audit Committee. Matthew Romero. Hello,
Madam
Matthew.
Chair, hi. Madam Chair, members of the board, a Fiscal Service and Audit Committee meeting was held on Tuesday, May 5th via Zoom meeting. In attendance was myself, BDD Financial Manager, Rick Carpenter, BDD Facilities Manager. Commissioner Hansen attended for the chair, Vihil Coppler, Commissioner Hamilton, Ira Roybal, Tom Eaglehoff, and Ken Kirk. During this meeting, I provided an update on the fiscal year 18-19 audit and financial statements. That update is that our auditors, CLA, have begun the audit and test work for BDD. We had an entrance conference with the chair on April 23rd. The goal is to have financial statements issued to the state auditor before June 30th, and I will continue to provide updates to the board and the partners. During this meeting, we discussed the report on the third quarter financial position, which I will also provide an update as part of this meeting. And then we did discuss consent agenda 12, which has now been removed, and consent agenda item number 13, with no major issues or concerns. That is the end of my report, if there's any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Mackie? All right, I just want to state that the reason I wasn't able to attend is we had a special city council meeting at the same time. So thank you for sitting in for me, Commissioner Hansen.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if there's a meeting, another meeting of this group, can I get notice of it, please?
Yes, you can.
Yes, I will include you.
Right.
And
Okay.
Madam Chair, I want to thank you for the opportunity to attend the meeting. It was very informative and very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. That's not a required approval item, so we'll go on to item 8, monthly update on BDD operations. Randy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. BDD operations for the month of April. Our raw water diversions averaged 3.93 million gallons per day. Drinking water deliveries through our booster stations 4A and 5A averaged 2.98 million gallons per day. Delivery to Las Campanas now was 0.6 million gallons per day on average. Our on-site treated and non-treated storage 0.5 million gallons per day average. BDD in April provided approximately 40% of the water supply to the city and county for the month.
Excuse me, Randy, can I ask if you're not speaking, if you can mute your microphones, please? Okay, the other thing I should have mentioned, Randy, before you started, apologize, is that Jamie Ray emailed an updated information report that includes page 1,
Correct.
but it's the whole report. So not following Rand's presentation, you should pull up the email you received from Jamie Ray earlier outlining the whole presentation. So sorry, I didn't make that sooner. So please continue.
That's essentially it. We did, as I said, provide approximately 40% of the water supply to the city for April. That is increasing rapidly now that we are in May and citywide demand is increasing. There is a drought summary briefly attached on page 2. Our year-to-date diversions are listed in the graph below. That's it. So I stand for any questions.
Do we have questions? Commissioner Hanson?
I don't have any questions.
I mean, Hamilton, I'm sorry.
That's okay. There might be a few times that it's appropriate to ask this question. Have you seen differences in water demand that you attribute to the current pandemic and restrictions? And do you anticipate any in the future? Obviously the near future?
We certainly did see lower than expected demand in April, which we speculate is essentially all we can do to restaurants being closed and hotel motel occupancy likely being down. End of April and now early May, the city parks have begun irrigating. And so that has brought demand up, and it's about where we expect this time of year. So possibly people, as the weather warms, are using a little bit more water at home as well. So demand is about where we expect.
Thank you.
Hamilton, do you have any further?
I almost expected residential demand to go up a little bit, just because people were home more and doing more things at home. And just in terms of, yeah.
Yeah, it was a little cooler in April, and I think that kept the demand down a bit. And then now, of course, suddenly the temperatures have risen. People are home. I'm guessing they're starting to water gardens and things like that. So it's about where we expect now as May begins.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments or questions?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Hanson.
So this is not on the subject, but it seems that people cannot get online, that the link on the city website is for the Archaeological Committee and not for BDD. And I'm getting texts and emails from people saying they cannot get on this meeting. So I don't exactly know what to do.
Joe Abeta, I see that you're still on screen. Can you address that, Joe? Joe Abeta, do you hear me? Darn. Joe, are you there? If you will.
Madam Chair, I think it's working now.
Okay.
Hold on, I gotta go.
Oh, there he is.
I'm here, I'm sorry.
Joe, we got, Commissioner Hanson received some communication that this meeting can't be accessed. However, Councilor Merrill Worth just said that it was working. Can you double check?
On YouTube?
Yeah, they're getting the Archaeology Committee meeting instead of our meeting.
Okay.
Let me
Councilor
see.
Merrill Worth, can you confirm?
Nope.
That was the meeting, but it just flipped over. I think it's okay now.
No, I've been watching, it's on here. I've been monitoring, well, you know, off and on, I've been doing my work email, but YouTube doesn't flip back and forth once it's on a specific site or channel, once it starts to stream.
Well,
So it's
Councilor
there.
Joe, Councilor Worth just confirm that it is on now.
Okay,
So I believe we're good to go. Commissioner Hanson, I think we're good to go. So if you're communicating with anyone, please let them know to try again. All right. Does that work?
Actually, I just got a text also from someone. The information they provided was more specific. They're trying to access the meeting via the link at the top of the agenda. So maybe somebody needs to specifically check the link at the top of the agenda and make sure that's correct. So Joe, if you could potentially do that, or Jamie Ray, that would really be appreciated.
So in the alternative, if you go to the City of Santa Fe YouTube channel, you can connect to this meeting.
Okay.
Yes. And I am, the people who were texting me said that yes, now the meeting is broadcasting.
just to confirm, the meeting has been broadcasting since the beginning. Just
For
to
some
confirm.
reason, they were getting a different meeting.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. It might be operator on it, but I know that the meeting has been on since the beginning.
All right, so
Okay.
I'm going to come back to this. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Counselor and Commissioner. In the event you get any communication from now, you might assure them to go to the city website, the YouTube channel, and that appears to be working. So I'm going to move, just to summarize, we just finished item 8, and I'd like to know if there's any questions for Randy before we move on. I may have asked them before, but okay, thank you very much, Randy. We're moving to 9, report from facilities manager, and this is a verbal report. Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. I don't have a lot to update the board on at this time, other than lately there's been some discussion around the furloughs associated with city employees and how that might affect BDD operations and our ability to perform our essential functions. So in that regard, I've been meeting regularly with my direct reports and my group managers and also the water division director on how we're going to staff and organize our staff. We have a full staff. We've worked very hard on that the last several months to fill all the vacancies in operations. We do have some redundancy, which provides us flexibility. We have full coverage at this time. And I have every confidence that the BDD will be able to maintain the necessary levels of service to function and perform our essential functions. So I just wanted to make that clear to the board.
Okay, Commissioner Hamilton, I'll call on you.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I don't know if this is an acceptable time to you for me to bring up my concerns having to do with city furloughing making that decision to furlough BDD employees. Is this?
Yeah, please proceed.
Good? So I have some real concerns about that process. I understand how important it is for everybody to move quickly. I certainly understand the city's concerns and that there might have been particular things having to do with maybe overtime expenses at BDD, and I recognize that the city consider that as the project manager, BDD employees are city employees. However, I believe this decision to do furloughs that impact BDD are effectively a budget decision, and for BDD that is an agency that has a separate board. Budget decisions are within the purview of the board. So I have some real concerns about the process that was not followed. In fact, setting the budget, that whole process is established in the JPA. So I feel like we need to go back to that process and maybe even have, there's already been mention of a special meeting, have a special meeting to discuss what's needed in terms of action. And in that regard, I also want to say that the BDD certainly needs to review revenue projections. If Rick and Mackie and then the board have reason to be concerned about revenues impacted by the pandemic, we need to evaluate those independently. But I want to point out that the revenue sources for BDD are entirely separate from and different than revenue sources to the city and revenue sources to the county. If the city, and so I actually on Tuesday night at the FSAC meeting, I mentioned this, and I'd like to, officially in open meeting, request that we get that kind of assessment for the BDD board to consider. Do we have impacts that we have to think about in terms of revenue stream that would impact our budget, in which case we should be making decisions about what to do to assure that we can stay within that budget if we need to be conservative. Any decisions that are made to do furloughs to BDD people, those savings stay with BDD and are then can be used to mitigate any revenue impacts we think we're going to have, or repaid to the partners the way that we would share any kinds of, altered budget should the BDD board, vote to alter the budget out of necessity. So in addition, I'm not really anticipating reasons, given the nature of the need for water, that the city and the county would be reducing water use beyond normal conservation. However, if the city or the county, for that matter, any partner intends to want to revisit what they pay to BDD, so BDD revenues are based on partner payments that, for water use, spoken generally, for the potential to use water. And it's agreed to in the informal documents. If that's going to change, we need to include that discussion in a special meeting or put it on next month's agenda, whichever is appropriately timely. But I'd really like to hear what other people think, but we have an approved budget, and I consider the water utility essential. As a matter of fact, I understand it falls with the governor to decide what's essential in time of an established crisis, but using the term loosely, unofficially, I consider provision of water essential. And I think the board should take the time to discuss whether we can meet all our operations, whether internal to BDD, we have a budgetary need to reduce payroll time and expenses, and also other expenses, including purchases. And so I know the city has also imposed like a no spend and a no contracts thing. In my mind, those do not apply to BDD without going through the board and having the board review what's necessary to spend and what we have budget for and what we have the revenues to cover. So I'll leave it at that at the moment, but I really feel like we need to address this.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. Do we have anybody else who wishes to speak to this matter?
Yes,
Um,
I'm J.C. Holmes.
yes, please proceed.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to say that I'm in complete agreement with Commissioner Hamilton. I have touched on this topic over the years. We are an independent agency. We actually have an independent source of income. The only way we can provide that income, and the water that goes with it, is to have a well-staffed operation. And I think the decisions about staff should be completely within the purview of the board. They should not be subject to county staff or to city staff. And I have to assume there will be a little bit of a scuffle in that regard. There has been in the past. But on a topic of this importance, letting people go just because the city doesn't happen to have money is not proper, because we do have money and it is extremely important. It's not just essential. I think it's the most important single service the city or the county provides to the citizens here, the most important. So I am completely in agreement with Commissioner Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Helms. Commissioner Hanson.
Yes, I think that furloughing BDD employees is up to the board and up to the BDD. And so I think that needs to come to us. I do agree with Commissioner Hamilton on that point. I do agree this is an extremely essential service, and that if the city can't pay their bills, then that's something that we need to discuss as a board in the JPA. But at the moment, we have staff that, Mackie is our financial does all our finances, and this is an extremely busy time of the year for her. And so for her to be cut back on her hours, I find is slightly challenging, considering she has obligations to the auditors. And, there's just a lot of things that before a furlough happens at BDD, that needs to come to the board. And so I'll leave it there.
Commissioner Hanson?
In that respect, I wanted to add, there was one thing I did want to mention. I don't know if it's possible that there are personnel constraints having to do with the bargaining units with the city that might require unilateral, decisions on across the board furloughs, but the county does not have those. So I just want to allow for the fact that that might be something that the city wants to bring up with us. Even if that's the case, that I believe it is still necessary for this process to go through the board because it impacts budget and it's an independent budget. I do have concerns that about some potential impacts to operation, which Mr. Carpenter assured us that operators are still able to cover all shifts. Maybe I would like to hear that in more detail. We already have a late audit, and the city made a unilateral decision to furlough all their financial people, including Mackie. And I think that can potentially have some impacts that I'd like the board to discuss.
Okay, Mr. Ives.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to point out for what it's worth in the governor's, or I should say our health secretary's order of April 30, paragraph 2P, which became effective May 1st, in the description of essential businesses lists utilities, including their contractors, suppliers, and supportive operations engaged in power generation, fuel supply, and transmission, water and wastewater supply. So water is an essential business under the currently in place public health orders. Thank you.
Any other comment? Or before I'd like to hear from you again. I would like to just let the board know that I did have a meeting with the mayor yesterday wherein I brought up this issue. I believe, well, he was unaware of the approach taken, and I did let him know that I guess, Mr. Carter, you said that Jesse Roach would speak to this. I'm not sure if that's still your plan, but I asked the mayor to bring a perspective to this meeting, whoever was going to be here, from the city manager as to what, if anything, could be done, or at least a reasoning behind this. So I'll turn it over to you, Rick, to see if you have any new information on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. It's my understanding that the Water Division Director, Jesse Roach, is part of this meeting and is prepared to address any questions that the board may have in this regard.
Okay, Jesse, if you're on, can you give a presentation or whatever it is you would like to report to the board?
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for having me. Thank you for this opportunity. I just wanted to.
You're gonna need to speak up.
Okay. I just wanted to take the opportunity to apologize to the board for, I feel like we dropped the ball here. There were, it's been kind of a quick, I went and looked back at the timing of all this, and on April 20th, we got an email from the mayor stating that across the board furlough was being implemented. And the next day there were letters from the city manager going to BDD employees. And at that point, we started to scramble to figure out how we would continue to deliver our same level of service across the water division with a 4-hour per week average furlough. And that kind of became overwhelming to us, and there is no excuse. The BDD board should have, at that point, I wish I had come to you, Chair, and said, look, we have this issue coming where we are going to need to implement furloughs. We're working on it internally to come up with schedules so that we can continue to provide our essential level of service with a reduction in hours, and ask for your direction on how we would like to bring this to the board. I probably can't speak to some of the other issues that have been brought up so far, but I am here to answer questions to the best of my ability, and also to apologize that in this sort of fray of what has happened in the last 2 weeks, we did not formally figure out a way to bring the board into these conversations and these discussions.
So Jesse, Madam Chair, so Jesse, I understand your situation and I understand that you are new, but this is a historical problem with the city not bringing things to the board. And so it just kind of aggravates a situation that is already happening. So, I appreciate you saying that you didn't recognize this, but this is kind of the same excuse we constantly get. And so I think that needs to be not the excuse, but that you have to pay attention to the fact that this is a separate board. And I did have a separate meeting with you a month or two ago and brought up some other issues that are kind of not the same line, not having anything to do with furloughs, but once again, the board not being consulted and the city thinking that they run this board. And I find that, unacceptable.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hanson, I have no excuses.
Thank you.
Okay, well, may I suggest that perhaps maybe we don't have to vote on this, but if I see any nods, I think it would be appropriate to write a letter to the city manager, letting our opinion on this be known. I do agree that this has happened more in the past on other matters, and I think I don't want to be flippant, but I think it may be just out of sight, out of mind. And it's unfortunate, but it has happened before. So I would suggest that perhaps a letter be written to more formalize that this is a serious matter and that the BDD board was overlooked.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, let me clarify something. I really appreciate the apology, and everything you and Commissioner Hanson have said is true, but this isn't a social interaction issue, and this isn't a matter of, it is just a matter of policy. And I am actually would like to request officially that we have a special meeting to review the BDD budget, BDD revenues, any projected, anticipated reductions in revenues, and how that will impact our accepted budget, and make the board decision. And at that time, the city and the county and all the partners will participate as is typical. And And I think it's at that time we can discuss whether within the realm of the BDD budget, what we need to make changes to or not. And that those decisions, if there's a reason the city feels that because they're city employees, they object to it being different, we can hear that at that time. But it is the board's budget decision. I'd like to request a special meeting to discuss that in a timely fashion, like maybe within a week or two, based on whether Rick and Mackie can get us thoughts on revenue changes in that time frame.
Thank you. Councilor Romero Worth.
Madam Chair, I don't think that we can do a letter because I think that would require a vote. And we haven't noticed that there would be a vote on this particular issue. So I think Commissioner Hamilton is correct that what we need is just, we've flagged the issue and there needs to be more discussion with the city staff, the city manager, the city attorney's office, and of course our folks to figure out, you know, what the rules are here, and then a special meeting about, you know, what impacts the COVID crisis, public health crisis has had on our budget for BDD, and what, if any, thing we can and should be doing.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll discuss the sense of the discussion that we had here, though, with the city manager, just to let her know that, you know, we're speaking about this. Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think that having a special meeting is a good idea. And I know that it would have to be noticed. So that's probably 10 days unless we needed to do an emergency meeting. I know there is another item that was left off of the consent agenda that needs to be approved. So I would ask Nancy Long what she thinks the time frame can be for us to have this meeting, and then also ask Mackie and Rick how they feel about getting this information together for us.
Madam Chair and Commissioner Hanson, for a special meeting, we would need 3 days notice, and the agenda would have to be posted 3 days in advance of that. You are correct that as to the other item that there was a glitch with on the agenda, we are going to need to present that to the board sooner rather than later. Obviously, we've got to check people's schedules, but that one could be at the same special meeting. And I would just add the caveat that depending on city personnel availability and the work that we're asking them to do in order to have a meaningful special meeting, I think we would have to check in with them to see what kind of lead time they need. But hopefully it could be something that could happen quickly, and hopefully at the same meeting that we're talking about having on the Snell and Wilmer agenda item.
Thank you, Nancy. Anything else? All right, Rick, did you have anything else on your report?
Madam Chair, no, I think that covers it. Thank you.
All righty, thank you very much. Thank you, Jesse. Next item 10, update on.
Madam Chair, so is there going to be a process for scheduling the special meeting?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Are we going to have a process? Who's going to be in charge of scheduling the special meeting? If we're not going to schedule it now, I don't want this to fall through the cracks.
Nancy, can you comment on how you think we should proceed with that?
Yes, Madam Chair and Commissioner Hamilton. I believe what we should do is perhaps Rick, Mackie, and I should talk about the components of that meeting and who we might need to also involve from the city. So essentially, I'm saying you would be putting the three of us in charge of trying to get that scheduled and determining what kind of work has to go into having a special meeting on that topic that's meaningful.
And Madam Chair, if you don't mind, if I could add to that, we will, of course, endeavor to be as timely as we can possibly be. But as we've stated earlier in this meeting, it's an extremely busy time already this time of year for Mackey. And I think there's going to have to be some conversations at the city manager level and then feedback to us as well that we would wrap up into our presentation. It'll take us a while, a few days at least, to go back through the budget, look at revenue projections, look at demand projections for what kind of water we think we're going to sell, what kind of cash we have on hand, and fold all that up into a set of recommendations that we would make. So we would want to do that as soon as we possibly can, but I don't think we can pull it together in a matter of a few days.
All right, well, at least we will begin process. And in response to Commissioner Hamilton's discussion and wishes, I think that that's a good place to start. And
yes,
I would just add, I would like to be involved in those discussions as well. And we'll move forward. So
that sounds great. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
This won't fall through the cracks. Okay. Thank you, Rick, again. Item 10, updates on waters of the United States litigation. Kyle Harwood.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. You have a memo in your packet describing a number of litigation matters that are swirling around waters of the United States. Even since the time I prepared that memo, there's been additional lawsuits filed. There are now some 6 matters across the country. In 2 of those matters, New Mexico features somewhat prominently. New Mexico joined 16 other states on May 1st in filing a complaint regarding waters of the United States. And also the New Mexico Cattle Growers Association amended a long pending complaint over an earlier iteration of the WOTUS rule on April 27th. So I don't know what the wishes of the board are in terms of tracking this issue. There is as I've already indicated, a ton of litigation going on around the country, and I'll stand for any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Kyle. Do we have questions, comments? Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Kyle. Good to see you. So my feelings about this dirty water rule, now called the Navigable Waters Protection Rule. I am one, I would like to either have us join the lawsuit as an amicus brief, or think about what is happening, what is the Attorney General doing, what is NMED doing with this. I know that I spoke with Alex, and I would like Alex to give an update on some of the things that Alex Puglisi, and he's on the call, that happened this morning. You know, because this is incredibly serious for us with Lannel and what will happen to our MOU, what's going to happen to our protection of our water. And then also I'd like you, when we get to the MOU, to please read Joni's, Aaron's public comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you want Alex to report?
I did. Alex.
Alex, there you are. Okay.
Madam Chair and members of the board, thank you very much. What Anna is referring to is this morning, the New Mexico Municipal League Environmental Quality Association had their spring meeting by WebEx. And there was an EPA representative present at the meeting, as well as several Surface Water Quality Bureau members who commented on the WOTUS, the new WOTUS rule, and brought up a couple of things that were occurring. First, EPA Region 6 indicated that the Corps of Engineers and the EPA are working on a map of traditionally navigable waters and other waters that would still classify as waters in the United States. And obviously by default, those which would not. And supposedly that effort was underway and the states would be receiving those two agencies' determination of which qualified under the new rule. NMED indicated that they still believe they have the authority to regulate these discharges under the New Mexico Water Quality Act. The problem is they have neither the program nor the resources right now to do that. And so, for example, they brought up the fact that some of these discharges, if not all of them, could probably be regulated under groundwater discharge permits, which they have a highly functional program with respect to those permits. The problem is they have limited staff, and whether this could handle all the previous MPDS permits that now have to be covered was highly questionable. At the same time, Lano was specifically brought up, and the EPA Region 6 representative, and I'm waiting to get the presentation so I can distribute it to the board, but he said that he believed that discharges from facilities such as Lano would still be regulated at the point of confluence with a waters in the United States, such as the Rio Grande. When I asked how this would be done, considering the fact that Lano has a number of outfalls designated under their stormwater permit, and then a number of industrial outfalls, point source discharges coming from pipes at various facilities that would mix in addition to stormwater, because that's the only time it would make it to the Rio Grande, how you would tease out what contaminant came from what facility or from what solid waste management unit, and how you would apply limits to the specific units and outfalls. And he could not answer that question. And he said, they realized there were problems, but they're working it out. The other point is that there would be no way to, currently MPDS permits have both quality concentration limits, which limit like the parts per million of a constituent that can be discharged, plus mass loading limits, which should concern us at the BDD because we get this inflow of pollutants during storm events. It would almost make those mass loading limits in a permit impossible because you never know what the volume of a stormwater discharge is going to be at the confluence with the Rio Grande. And so to determine what the maximum mass loading limit that would apply to a permit for Lano would be almost impossible to calculate. And I think overall, we know that pollutants make it to the Rio Grande from Los Alamos. A lot of them are adhered to sediments that stay in the river. So those mass loading limits are very important to us. And EPA does not have an answer to that at the present time. However, he did mention the lawsuits that Kyle just mentioned, but they said they were proceeding as though the new rule would go into effect on June 22nd. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Alex. Any comments? Oh, Commissioner Hamilton.
Well, I have a quick small question for Alex or whoever else, and then another small question. Alex, the Region 6 person thought they would still be regulated on discharge at the confluence with a regulated water body with the Rio Grande. I thought there was wording at some point that got rid of any regulations in waters that were above any intermittent or non-perennial segments. So that he thinks that doesn't apply in this case?
No, he does feel that it would apply, that those provisions that you're talking about would apply to the receiving stream at the point of discharge from the outfall or from the stormwater solid waste management unit that's being regulated. But that discharge would be to a non-regulated conveyance. So what they're doing is they're going to call these non-regulated waters conveyances to a water of the United States. And so they're treating it almost like an outfall pipe. So the
Right,
conveyance brings the water to the WOTUS, and at the point of confluence with the WOTUS, it's going to be regulated.
Yeah, I know they're trying to keep some regulatory hook for regulation, which I guess I appreciate. My other question was with respect to Commissioner Hansen's suggestion that we like join a suit, at least with an amicus brief or something. And obviously it's really true that this has big implications to BDD. On the other hand, like actually joining a lawsuit could be hugely expensive. And I wonder if we could lay out maybe all the possibilities so we could think about, like there have been so many really good letters and that have been developed already. And I'm not pretending that I'm tracking every one of them in my head, but with all the comments, and I know NMED, for instance, you know, I'm pretty sure they went through an exercise of defining waters that would no longer be covered and that sort of thing. But are there, I don't know, I guess this is for you, Kyle. Are there, are there less expensive? What are the options we have for participating, for following this, and for adding voice without adding a huge amount of effort, time and effort, money?
I think what Nancy and I have discussed in the past is if the board wants to have a serious conversation about litigation options, it's probably most appropriate to schedule an executive session on this topic because it is litigation related. And we can walk you through the pros and cons and the expected expenses. When we last presented on this in March, what I noted was that you know, there are some potential avenues that would not leave us open to discovery, which often becomes very expensive, like potentially an amicus brief. And there are times, you know, I think what I also reported back in March is that these cases sort of need to form a little bit before we can be really efficient and effective with some kind of a role in them. And so I think what I'd like to suggest is that we come back at a future board meeting and list an executive session and walk the board through several litigation options and the associated expense, if that's okay with the board.
Thank you, I like that.
Okay, Commissioner Ives, Mr. Ives.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to note that often with amicus briefs, they are prepared by parties, friends of the court, who are actively involved in litigation on the particular issue, and they seek the support of the amici to lend gravitas to the filing itself. So often one is asked simply to review a brief and join it as a party without necessarily a great deal of expense. And I would imagine that option is available probably in several instances in connection with the WOTUS rule. So there are mechanisms for trying to minimize the expense and yet be an active participant. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Commissioner Hansen. Oh, your microphone, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ives. I am also wondering, Kyle, if you have heard anything from the Attorney General's office on this issue?
I have not. I've been in contact with Mr. Verhule, who's general counsel, one of the associate general counsels at NMED, who I think you have met before, but I have not spoken with the Attorney General's office directly. But Mr. Verhule's been very responsive to any questions. Did you have something you wanted me to pose to him specifically?
I think as we go forward with this, I think we should possibly reach out. I mean, the Attorney General's office did join in the 2015 Waters of the US rule. So I'm just wondering where they are with this rule. Or
Yeah,
if they're also swamped and understaffed like NMED.
well, I can certainly check in with the AG's office and bring that information to the next discussion we have. Is it fair to say that direction to council and staff is to go ahead and schedule a executive session in June or July, where we can more fully inform you of the litigation options and the associated expense?
I think I would really appreciate that.
Okay. Very good. We'll plan on doing that then.
Okay, I guess that would be fine. Any other discussion on this matter? All right. Recommendation is that the council and consultants continue to carry on, and then we will work with Kyle and Nancy to see about an executive session.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Hanson.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you very much. This topic is really hurts my heart. And it really hurts my feelings for New Mexico and for the impact that this has on our communities throughout the North, especially, not just the impact that's happening to BDD, but to all of our ephemeral streams and waterways and everything that is being impacted by this horrible rule. And I just wanted to say that for the record, because I just find it so egregious that this is happening.
Thank you. Your comments are very much appreciated. All right, we'll move on to the next item, 11, report on the third quarter financial position for fiscal year 1920. Mackie.
Madam Chair, members of the board, this report is to update the BDD board and its partners on the quarter financial position as of March 31st, 2020. Chair, if you think it helps, I do have the report. I could share my screen, or I can just continue going through it.
It's a link on your attachments. So if everyone just, you can share your screen if you wish, but do we all have the attachment of Mackie's report?
I have the attachment.
Madam
Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
might be important for those members of the public who are watching, if it's possible to share the screen.
Thank you.
That's
Good point.
Okay,
I will see if I can do that.
That'd be wonderful.
Okay, on my report, I have provided a budget overview, which includes all expenses for the first 3 quarters. As you can see, the total expenses are $5,606,329. I have a column that shows our encumbrances March 31st. Our projections, the projections include projected salaries and benefits as currently staffed, electricity, chemicals, and solids as projected through the end of June. With the current expenses, encumbrances, and projections, BDD is estimated to spend 86% of the adopted budget. My report also includes our partner reimbursements of expenses. However, I was unable to finish the third quarter billing in time to include the breakout in this report. So you just see the lump sum here that still needs to be billed to our partners. And I am working on that and hope to get those invoices out to them by early next week. The second page of my report shows our other funds, the Emergency Reserve Fund and our Major Repair and Replacement Fund. The board has authorized expenditures from the Major Repair and Replacement Fund of $645,147. I have provided a budget overview that includes expenses through the third quarter. We have an encumbrance balance of $206,764. This balance represents our contract on our new pumps for booster stations 1A, 2A, our raw water lift station pump rebuild project, and our on-call engineer contract. So that's what makes up the balance that's remaining. I will continue to provide this report every quarter. And I also did want to mention, I will work with staff on getting the revenue projections you've requested so that we can get a special meeting done in the next week or so. So are there any questions on the actual report?
Thank you, Mackie. Any questions? I don't see any hands raised, and with the screen share, I can't see all of you. There you go. So any questions for Mackie? All right. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is item 13, request for approval of amendment number 1 to professional services agreement with Glorieta Geoscience, Inc. to extend the term of agreement and rollover contract balance fiscal year 2021.
Madam Chair.
I think that item was approved under consent agenda already. So
Correct.
you can move on.
Oh, that's right. Of course it was. Okay, thank you. The next, we're under discussion and action, consideration, and number 14, consideration and possible action regarding the framework for the 2020 BDD Lannel MOU. Rick Carpenter.
Okay, sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. Madam Chair, I think it would be appropriate and judicious with the board's time if Kyle were to just summarize the attachment. He and I have had numerous discussions about it, and we believe the efficacy of including it in this board meeting would be for the board to see what we feel in consultation with Glorieta Geoscience, of course, and others on staff, would be a priority list of items to include in our negotiations with Lannel. I don't think at this point they're listed in any order of priority, and we would like the board to give us feedback, if you would, and this is a discussion item, so that we could move forward with negotiations with Lannel, and as those negotiations develop, bring the items back either monthly or as needed to the board for further direction. Kyle, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, let me just add one thing really quick, which is I was going to start off my presentation just by pointing you to an April 3rd meeting or article that I'm sharing on the screen here. This was under the Lannel Report's first coronavirus case, but if you didn't notice it, towards the end of this article, they actually talk about making our Lannel MOU negotiations a top priority among their work. So I did not send this article out and I did not include it in the packet, but I wanted to just share that as a preamble. I guess the next thing I'll mention is behind this packet item, the first document is intended to be responsive to citizen member and Councilor Peter Ives requesting at the February meeting that we evaluate the 2007 board letter to the Department of Energy. And so we've summarized the requests that were made in 07 and the current status of each of those. And judging by your thumbs a moment ago, Peter, I hope this was responsive to your request. So,
and if I may, Madam Chair, yes, I wanted to express my thanks to Kyle for doing that. It was very helpful to have some of that history because hard to know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. So thank you.
Very good. Following that first memo under this agenda item in your packet is a second memo, which lays out a preliminary framework and principles for the 2020 Lannel MOU. This, as you know, in the past, past couple of months, our suggestion to you, Madam Chair and the board, is for staff and consultants to bring forward the concepts that we think might be included in the next iteration of the MOU. We've broken those out topically, relating to the early notification system, sediment evaluations in the canyon, BDD project sampling at the Rio Grande, data sharing, and then also coordination with our neighbor and friend, San Ildefonso Pueblo. So I know we're on limited time today, so I won't step through the memo or the recommendations in detail, but depending on the wishes of the board, this can be modified, things can be added, things can be deleted, but the general structure, I think, of this relationship with Lanel is to go back to them with this list as modified by the board and start trying to identify areas of agreement so that the new MOU can be drafted, and then that drafted MOU will come back to the board for action. So this is really asking the board for guidance on whether they would like us to pursue these concepts, something smaller or something bigger. And with that, I'll stop there and ask the chair for how she'd like to proceed.
Before I call on you all, I wanted to just make sure we're all on the same page, and that is we're looking at the April 29th memo, wherein you recommend several items to be included, and that is, Kyle, where we're at, right? These are your recommendations and you're asking for feedback so that you can proceed.
Yes, Madam Chair, if that wasn't clear. Yes, this is the April 29th memo. It's the second one behind tab 14.
Yes.
And yes, this memo, in these 26 recommendations, I think it's fair to say that we have picked up and expanded on the basic structure of the existing MOU. Just if you want to think of it in that way, is we've picked up all the elements of the current MOU and expanded on a fair number of them. So hopefully
Okay,
that's
thank you. Commissioner Hanson, I saw your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. So Kyle, I would also like you to read Joni's memo, or whoever has the public comments that have that are in relationship to this. And thank you. I appreciate your work on this. I consistently and always believe that we need more sampling and not less sampling. And also, especially with the dirty water rule, I think it's even more important that we continue to increase oversight of the runoff that's coming down off of the mountain.
Great, thank you for that, Commissioner. And I think we've got a number of provisions in the recommendations that will do that. Let me go ahead and share screen for everyone's benefit on the comment that we received from Ms. Ahrens, who, as you know, is a colleague in this area. She, I think it's fair to say just briefly that she, both of her suggestions on number 4 and 5 kind of are a little more specific about how these site visits and assessments of the various elements of the early notification system will be done as a group of professionals, both board and Lanel folks. And so I see her comments as adding a little more specificity to how those site visits and evaluations are done, and generally felt like it was a helpful contribution. So that was sort of my take on that comment, and not sure whether you had any other questions you wanted me to respond to, Commissioner.
Okay, Commissioner Hamilton.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. This frankly looks really good. And I'm glad to see we're pursuing that first part of it for the reestablishment of the site for the early warning. But maybe maybe it's in a way a follow-on from Commissioner Hansen's comment about sampling. I see in the third section, 15 through 20, all the sampling that will be done. But if I'm not mistaken, between the items that are above that are when we're talking about looking in the canyons themselves. So earlier we've made a comment about, you know, what we're doing now is kind of a reduced sampling regime. And so it looks like we're intending to work with them to get their data inventories for that area. The only actual sampling would be really in the vicinity of the BDD intakes and just upstream of that. Is that accurate?
Well, the sediment evaluations, Commissioner, are intended, so sections 10 through 14, those sediment evaluations are in the LA Pueblo Canyon watershed from the headwaters to the confluence with the Rio Grande. So that is what we call the sediment train, right? So those are, and this is something that James Biarzi and Jay Lazarus have identified, and we've made data requests to the lab, and they've been actually fairly pleasantly forthcoming with lots of interesting information about the existing sites within LA Pueblo Canyon. But I hope I'm answering your question, Commissioner, but sections 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 are intended to essentially identify any knowledge gaps in the LA Pueblo Canyon watershed from the headwaters to the Rio Grande. Does that help?
I think it does, but it sounds like that will not be, the actual sampling will not be done as part of the MOU with BDD. They are doing that sediment sampling and will share the results with us.
That's right. And number 13, I think, is conducting an assessment of the contaminant inventory and to evaluate and update appropriate protections regarding landfill-derived pollutants. So we've not, if the part that you feel is perhaps missing is a commitment from DOE to do the sampling that number 13 identifies,
right,
that could be added. Is that what you're getting at?
I think so. I wanted it was generically, yes, what I was getting at, pending what you said in response. So thank you.
Okay.
Yes, I agree with that. And Madam Chair.
Mr. Hanson.
On 109.9 sampling station on Sanai land, have we made any progress on that?
Short answer is no. Approaching San Ildefonso about E1099, I think, will require a fairly high-level approach by the board and its member utilities and the member governments like the city and the county. And so we have not approached San Ildefonso Pueblo yet. I think we wanted to get through at least this step of making sure the board reviewed our set of recommendations and gave us direction on these set of recommendations. Obviously that E1099 site has been discussed extensively, but I think if the board directs us to move forward with this summary of recommendations, then that will be a logical step, is to reach out to them accordingly.
Yeah, so the Pueblos are all closed at the moment and because of the coronavirus. So I don't know how much interaction is taking place at the moment. But I think that this is something that we could include John Dupuy possibly in our water utility director.
Okay, and I don't see John on the, unless he's one of these phone numbers, I don't think he's on this meeting, so I can certainly reach out to him. Again, I want to be clear that we've had a lot of conversations about E1099, but it seemed appropriate to have the board sort of direct us on this package of recommendations, and so we can reach out to them if
excuse me, but John is now a panelist. He is here.
Yeah, John is on.
Oh, hi, John. How are you?
Okay,
He's still muted, but maybe we can get him to unmute.
Or we can just keep talking about him.
John, we're hoping you'll join our conversation.
Well, I know we don't have a ton of time this
Uh-huh.
evening. Oh, there he is. You there, John?
okay, while we're waiting for John, I just want to jump in here and say that we have an executive session scheduled. We have a set amount of time for that before we have to give up the meeting screen. So I just want to have everyone be mindful of the time. Okay. So John, do you have anything to add to the discussion here? I didn't hear.
I'll follow up with John. He and I have discussed this before in generalities. And so if it's the board's direction that we move forward with these recommendations, I will certainly include John and county staff in that conversation.
This is under discussion and action. So if the board wants to give Kyle direction in the form of a memo, I think we can entertain that. Commissioner Hamilton.
Well, if you need a motion, I'd be happy to make a motion to say, provide the direction that this outline is good with some of the minor additions that you took notes on, and we're happy to see you moving forward with this.
And I'll second that.
So Commissioner Hamilton, your statement was a motion?
Yes, yes, ma'am, it was. I thought I had that word in there, sorry.
That's okay. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Do we have any further discussion on this matter? See,
Just one moment. So Kyle, I would love to have a further discussion with you and John Dupuy on the E109.9 station.
Very good, Commissioner. I'll organize that with your staff.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, JV Ray, would you please call the roll?
Chair Gil Koppler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anna Hansen,
Yes.
Commissioner Anna Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Citizen Member JC Helms,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Next item is item 15, consideration and possible action on resolution 2020-2, determining reasonable notice for public meetings of the Buckman Direct Diversion Board during a public health emergency. Nancy Long.
Yes, Madam Chair and members of the board. Although the board did just enact an open meetings resolution at the beginning of the year, a lot has changed in the world since that January meeting. This amended resolution, essentially, it's a restated resolution. It includes all of your previous items that were approved by the board as to what constitutes notice for your public meetings, but I've added a paragraph that deals with a public health emergency and how we will deviate from those requirements in the event of a public health emergency, allowing for remote participation by conference, telephone, or video platforms, such as we're doing today. And so long as the public can hear or view the meeting, allowing the chair to cancel meetings as necessary. And should you go to in-person meetings, which we certainly hope to do someday, but they're not completely open to the public, it allows for that as well. So it's in line with what you are seeing from, I'm sure, your respective bodies on amending what the notice is. It also provides that we will look to any guidance provided by the New Mexico Attorney General's office, as you have done today in calling roll and that sort of thing. I did receive a good edit, I believe, from Councilor Romero Worth that when we're talking about a public health emergency, to reference as that might be declared by the WHO or New Mexico Department of Health or another public health authority, so that it is spelled out that that would be the commanding authority, that we wouldn't just declare it ourselves, so to speak. So I am recommending that the board approve this resolution so that we can stay in line with our Open Meetings Act resolution going forward in this public health emergency as we've done today, and will gladly accept any questions or any revisions that anyone would like to see to this resolution.
Thank you, Nancy. Councilor Romero Worth and then Commissioner Hamilton.
So I would just like to, we can do this a couple ways, I guess. I would move that we approve this, but I would like to have incorporated the changes that Nancy mentioned about how we define the public health emergency, that we lean on the World Health Organization, if it's a global pandemic like the situation we have, or if it's more of a localized public health emergency, we would look to the New Mexico Department of Health. So I would just ask that in approving this, those changes be incorporated.
Councilor Romero Worth, was that a motion?
It was a motion.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have a second?
Yes, I would second with the changes as recommended.
Okay, and Commissioner Hamilton, you also had your hand up. Did you have anything further?
No, I was going to make a motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? Okay, Jamie Ray, would you please call the roll?
Chair Vigil Coppler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anna Hansen,
Yes.
Commissioner Anna Hamilton,
Yes.
Councilor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Citizen Member JC Helms,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Next, we're on matters from the board, and I would like to start by reading a statement from our last meeting. And I want to state in our minutes, the only matter discussed during the executive session of our last board meeting on March 5th, 2020, was the matter as stated in the motion to go into executive session, and no further action was taken. So with that, do we have, we're on matters from the board. So I see Commissioner Hansen's hand.
So I just want to mention this because as I was reading the minutes, we were talking about BDD solar in our last meeting. And I'm just wondering if where the city is moving with the BDD solar, and if they've reached out and talked to our staff. I did check in with Claudia, and she invited herself to that meeting of the city, and then she was not able to participate because we at the county had a meeting in front of the PRC, and so she needed to be to that. But I just want to state for the record that, you know, the BDD is a 50-50 ownership model with a 50-50 financing and 50-50 benefits. And so as we move forward with the solar or with other projects that the city, remember that we as the county are 50% ownership of the BDD. And that was really the main thing that I wanted to state from the comments that Ms. Wheeler made at the last meeting. I know that Regina has moved over to, at least I have heard this, that she has moved over to the regional emergency management position. And so I'm sure that many of these things are kind of put on hold. I know that a lot of money has been rolled back from the state that we have received in the 2019 and in the 2020 capital outlay. So that puts all of these things in a completely different light. But I just want to state that for the record. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other matters from the board? All right, seeing none, I will state that the next regular meeting is June 4th at 4 o'clock. And we are then going to, next on the agenda is executive session. So I can't remember, Nancy, is that something you read or do I read?
Madam Chair, what I usually do that is, I think, helpful to the board is I will state the motion that you can
Okay.
ask for, and then someone will say that they make that motion. So
All
at
right.
this point, you should ask for a motion to adjourn and go into executive session in accordance with the New Mexico Open Meetings Act, NMSA 1978, Section 1015(1)H7, for discussion regarding pending litigation in which the BDDB is a participant, including without limitation, Buckman Direct Diversion Board versus CDM Smith.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, before we vote, I just want to say that all of you should have received an invitation, that those at least that are supposed to attend the executive session, you should have received an invitation in your inbox. It's a separate meeting, so if we can, without haste, join that meeting, because as I mentioned earlier, we have to give up the screen time. So I'd appreciate everyone signing on as soon as possible after we adjourn. So JB Ray, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Chair Hill Coppler,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anna Hansen,
Yes.
Commissioner Anna Hamilton,
yes.
Councilor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Citizen Member JC Helms.
Yes.
That's everyone.
Who was the meeting invite from?
It was from myself, Jamie.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
See you in the next screen.
Bye.
Bye.
I did not.